Welcome everyone to Intro to Running, my top 7 tips. So this is really for people who have started running maybe in the past 6 months or even just during quarantine, or even more experienced runners or regular runners that are looking for up-to-date research or even just a way to better organize their running training program. So first, if you guys don't already know me, my name is Michaela, or on Instagram, I'm Michaela's Physio. If any of you guys follow me, I am a physiotherapist at Foundation Physiotherapy at the Front End Spadina location. I'm also the running consultant at this location. So I'm a new runner relatively. So what that means is I've been training consistently for just about under a year. I used to be a synchronized swimmer, so I swam all through high school. And then when I went over to university, I would run semi-regularly. So I'd run on the treadmill at the gym or in the summers, but I never had a formal training program or any real running goals or races. So about a year ago, when I started to get back into running more seriously, I had a knee injury that kind of capped me at 3K. So I started rehabbing that in June, and this October I was able to run a 10K without pain. And I was signed up for a marathon next month, which is no longer happening, but that is my next running goal. So a little bit about me. What I want out of this webinar for you guys is, if you already are a runner or a new runner, just to improve your running ability or your performance, get you running a little bit farther or faster, decrease your risk of running related injuries. So when you first start running, that's when you're at the highest risk of having an injury. And also just to provide you guys some knowledge to allow for a more informed training program. So I'll be talking about what type of training program you should be doing a lot throughout this talk. So I won't go into any exercise science or physiology about running, but I do want you guys to keep in mind this one principle of tissue loading. So when I say tissue, I just mean muscles, joints, bones, things like that. And when I say loading, I just mean the impact or stress that you put on the tissue when you run. So if it's too little, so if you're running and you may be capping at a certain amount of kilometers, or you find that you're not getting faster, you might not be stressing or loading your tissues enough, and you're in this kind of left column where you're seeing no change. If you're starting to run and you notice that you're getting a lot of pain, maybe in your knees or your shins or your low back, you might actually just be loading the tissue too much for what it's ready for at this moment. And that's where you're going to start to develop some injuries. And it's kind of right in between these two where your body starts to adapt. This just means your muscles get stronger, your bones get more resilient. This is where you see progress in your time and your distance. And that's where I'm going to kind of try and focus all my running tips, is to kind of keep you in this area of the spectrum. So obviously you need to say something about COVID. Anyone who's following the news know that they say that COVID can be spread through droplets through our mouths. When you take big breaths, obviously when you run, you take big breaths and you're breathing out of your mouth for most of it. So you just want to be respectful of others. So we recommend not running near lakeshore or High Park or anything where there's a lot of people. Don't run in and out of people, cross the road. If you see anyone, keep the social distancing 6 feet apart. It's just really important. Before we get into the actual tips, just a bonus tip, I didn't want to put this in the 7 tips, but I want you guys all to have a system to track your runs. So whether you've never run before or you've been running for a year, you need to have something like this. I personally use the Nike Run Club. It's a free app you can download on any type of smartphone. And what it does is it allows you to keep track of your running time, distance, and speed, both in real time. So you can look at it while you're running, or it gives you an update every kilometer. As well, you can look kind of at your whole runs. You can look back at past runs and really get an idea of where you're at. It's also great to monitor progress, so you can see where you're at now versus a month from now using the app. And it's great to set short and long-term goals. So with this app, every time I set out for a run, I put in the kilometers that I want to do, and it keeps me updated on how close I am to reaching that goal. And then there's also programs within the app that you can do week-long goals, month-long goals, and so on. It's free, it's really effective, really helpful, no reason not to get it. So my first tip that we're going to go into is talking about a warm-up, because that's the first thing you should be doing before any running occurs. So this is where I'm going to ask people to write in the chat if they feel comfortable, kind of just get an idea of what people, or if people are doing a warm-up and what that's looking like. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds. If no one feels comfortable, no problem, but.
So we got some leg swings. Some people do some quick high knees.
Nice.
some stretching.
Okay.
Somebody does some 5-minute lower body stretch.
Nice.
Quick paced walk to get warmed up.
Nice.
A lot of people are saying they do some hip stretching. A slower first kilometer to get their body moving.
Awesome.
Some breath work. Sasha does some foam rolling.
Nice.
Calf raises, some dynamic calf stretches with Jen. Raj has been really quiet this time. I don't know why.
Okay, perfect. So it
Some
sounds
hamstring
like
stretches. So yeah, a lot of lower body stretching.
awesome. Okay, that's great. Great that you guys are doing a warm up. Obviously, you're going to focus on your lower body. It's great to hear like either walking or short running. Kind of the goals for any type of warm up is to increase your heart rate. So if you're walking or running, doing something that you're getting a little bit more out of breath. The reason of this is when your heart beats faster, more blood is going to circulate to your body, warm up your muscles. You want to stretch all available range. So that's lower body, kind of back, even arms and torso. And you want to prepare your muscles, so activate your muscles so they're better able to prepare to help you when you take each step with running. When I say to do a proper warm-up, I mean a dynamic warm-up, which it sounds like a lot of people are doing, which is great. If you don't know what dynamic warm-up means, it just means doing something where you're continually moving. So for people that said they're stretching their hamstrings or their hips, the best way to do it is moving in and out of full range. So like leg swings where you're going and kicking your leg all the way up and back, or out to the side and back is what you want to do, as opposed to just bringing your leg up and bending over it and holding it. The idea of that is if you do kind of a static stretch, so where you're holding something, you're putting your muscles in a lengthened position, and then when you have to go forcefully contract them, it can lead to injury. So some examples of dynamic warm-ups are things that you guys said. So leg kicks, high knees, bum kicks, lunges, or heel sweeps. I'm not going to go over like a trained warm-up, but I do have one on my Instagram. I'm Michaela's Physio if you guys want to check it out. Basically, the idea is you should be moving your hips, knees, ankles, and kind of torso in every different direction. And you want to be doing something like this for about 5 minutes. Easy walk or easy to medium walking or jogging is really good because it helps increase your heart rate and it kind of starts to activate your muscles. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you that full range of your lower body, because you don't use your full range when you walk or run. So you want to do some of these as well, just to get your body a little bit more stretched out before you do your quick walk or your easy run. So the benefits of this obviously can decrease your risk of injury. If you warm your muscles up before you go into forcefully contract them, you're going to put yourself at less risk for a muscle strain. It can improve performance. So some of the latest research is showing that you can actually have more power in your push-up phase when people did dynamic warm-ups versus a static stretch or static warm-up. And it can help reduce post-run muscle tightness. So if any of you guys are new runners and just started running during quarantine, you'll know that your calves get really tight when you start running. So some dynamic stretches can really help with that before you go out to run. So tip number 2 is to establish a baseline. So if I was talking one-on-one with any of you guys and I asked you what your baseline is, I just want you to think now if you would feel comfortable answering that. If you can, great. If you can't, what I would suggest to kind of figure out where your baseline is to get outside for 30 minutes, run, walk, kind of do whatever feels easiest for you. So easy intensity, I say like out of 4 or 5 out of 10 is what you're feeling the whole time. It's not pushing yourself too hard, and see where you get with that. And a good way to track that is your Nike Run app or whatever app you use. And once you have that, it's a lot easier for you guys to develop your own personalized training plan. And it's also a way better and more effective way to set goals for yourself that are realistic. So someone that is kind of only able to walk for that full 30 minutes versus someone that's able to do a continuous run is going to have a way different looking training plan, as well as different goals, both short and long term. Once you have your goal, your baseline, what you want to do is you want to develop a training plan for your training schedule for your week. So this might be one of the most important things we talk about all webinar. What I want you guys to keep in mind is running injuries are repetitive stress injuries, meaning that when you're running kind of the same way, so you're using the same muscles, you're hitting the ground at the exact same foot strike, and you're doing maybe a similar distance, so similar loading onto your body, that's what's going to cause overuse injury or put too much stress on that tissue and cause injury. So the way to kind of get around this is to add as much variation to your running as possible. So I'm going to go over a training schedule that kind of goes for 3 to 4 times a week of running. If you do something less than that, that's fine. If you're a new runner, you kind of want to stick around this range, not go too much more than that at this time. And the 4 kind of principles are distance running, time or tempo running, speed intervals, and recovery. So if you're going for a run today, like Ryan maybe mentioned, maybe pick one of these that you want to do and make your run around that. So for distance, you want to do it around once a week. It's a slow and steady tempo, so you're not pushing yourself too hard or too quickly during this race, but you're doing a higher kilometer. So if you just did your baseline test and maybe you're at like 5 kilometers when you did your baseline test, you want to kind of stick to around 5 kilometers or a little bit more for your distance running to challenge yourself. And you're really working on that like aerobic capacity, so strengthening your legs, your lungs, and the slow twitch muscle fibers. And the way you want to progress this is, it's a safe rule of thumb is kind of 10% each week. If you're under that, 8 to 10 kilometer range, you can progress a little bit more. They say up to 40% safely. So if you're at that 3 kilometer range, you don't have to go just to 3.3. You can go 3.5 or 4 your next time. But you really, you don't want to be stressing it too much. So if you've done a 10K, you don't want to jump next to a 15K. You want to do that 11K, that 12, 12 and a half, and work your way up. I like to say to progress every 2 to 3 weeks. You really want to listen to your body, but slow and steady progressions is the safest and most effective way. Your time or tempo run is a little bit faster than your distance run, but a little bit of lesser distance. So once you guys start getting into races, if any of you guys are, you use your race times to kind of figure out your tempo run. But for now, you can either use your baseline or your distance run. So for example, we'll stick with the 5K. If you're running 5K in 30 minutes, that's 6 minutes a kilometer. You maybe want to make your time or tempo run kind of anywhere from 15 to 25 seconds faster than that. So you could do 4 kilometers at kind of 5:45, and you're using that app to measure it. If you don't like the app or you don't like the control of it, really you just want to think about going a little bit faster for a shorter distance. Starting to work both that slow and fast muscle twitch fibers. And the way you progress your tempo is just alongside your distance. So if you kind of follow this training schedule, you'll notice that your distance will get a little bit faster. Once you start to notice that, you fasten your time or tempo runs. Speed interval training is really important when you're kind of starting a new training program. It's something that's often missed with new runners. They don't feel either they need to do this or they don't feel skilled enough to do this, but it's really important in progressing your running ability or making yourself faster or even farther. So what this means is you're doing something with high intensity. So this is the run where you're feeling like out of breath, you're working that 8 out of 10 effort, and you're doing intervals. So you're doing something really hard and then you're giving yourself a rest. You can kind of also change up the way you do your speed. So you can do it on flat ground, you can do hill training, you can do stairs, and working a little bit more on the anaerobic fitness. If you guys are interested, you can comment below or even message Matt or I, because speed workouts are probably the least easy ones to just come up with because they're not just you run. So if you guys have interest in some planned speed workouts, let us know and maybe I can start posting once a week on the Foundation Physiotherapy Instagram. So let me know if that sounds of interest. And lastly is your recovery run. So recovery runs, again, are to be done once a week. They say you need a recovery run if you're running more than 3 times a week. So if you're only running twice a week, you don't need to do a recovery run. You can kind of maybe prioritize one of the other principles that you didn't do. But if you've done those 3, recovery is what you need. It should be done less than 24 hours after your distance run. It's a slow and easy pace. So a good thing to think about is you should be able to talk on a phone or talk to someone else while you're running. It shouldn't be difficult. And the literature is kind of moving away from the idea that recovery runs are to help with removing lactic acid or helping with delayed muscle soreness, and it's actually more to do with increasing your actual fitness levels. So when you're doing a recovery run, because it's so close to your distance run, you're really just challenging your body in the fatigue state, and it's going to help you with the distance and the time and everything like that. So that was something I found really interesting and made me feel that I should never miss a recovery run. So neither should you guys. Tip number 4 is to go slow and steady for most of your runs. So if you are a relatively new runner, and I mean if you're doing it in the 6-week period up to the 6-month period, really we're worried about doing any type of injury by going either too much, too soon, too fast. If you feel like running is something that you have to be really intense when you start, you may see an initial improvement in your running, but then it will go stagnant or plateau because your muscles will be fatigued without having that adequate time to adapt to the loading, or you'll get injured. So go slow, steady. A good rule to follow is kind of the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the runs are slow and steady and 20% of the runs are that high intensity. If you're following that 4 days a week, 75% is fine to kind of go slow and steady, and then that 25% where you're doing that speed workout where you're really challenging yourself. So a little bit of more distance maybe with lower intensity, really focusing on consistency and frequency. That's going to be the safest bet to get you stronger, faster, and injury-free. So tip number 5 is going to be to incorporate a run-walk program. So before we talk about this, I really want to debunk any myth that a run-walk program is for beginner runners or is easier than continuous run. It's not. It's used by elite athletes all over the world, and it's encouraged by Olympian coaches of run and track. So just a fun fact, marathon runners that took 1 minute break every 1.5 miles showed better times, so were quicker than continuous marathon runners. This has been replicated in so many different ways. They show this is true in 10K programs, and there's so many personal anecdotes about how run walk programs can make you a faster and better runner. The idea of a run walk program is walking isn't meant to be when you're tired. So it's not you run, you get a little bit tired, and then you walk, which I'm sure all of us have done at some point in our running career. But what that does is that actually trains your body to respond to struggle or stress with rest. And instead what we want to do is we want to make our walking done when it's planned beforehand. So it kind of reorganizes our brain and how we think about how we need to rest while we run. There's studies that show it helps slow muscle fatigue when you're running because it gives you a little bit more recovery throughout your run. It increases your stress, so you're kind of changing the amount of loading that you're putting on the legs throughout your run. Increased control over breaks, so really good for kind of the mental or psychological aspect of running. And I couldn't find any research to back this up, but they do stipulate that while you run, you can maybe collect more endorphins than when you're running, so you can actually get a better runner high. So I thought that was cool, and I'm gonna be mindful of that when I do my run walks. So running walk programs are best for people who have like a mental or psychological fear of distance running. So if you're someone who just it's like, oh, I can't do 10K or can't do 5K or anything like this is a good way, because while 10K can seem super daunting, like 5 times 2 kilometers with a walk in between can be a lot easier to think about. It's also really good for overcoming plateaus in running performance. So plateaus usually come because your muscles get to a point where they're so fatigued that they can't be pushed past that certain point. So the run walk program is really good with that. I'm personally a runner that plateaus. I plateaued at 5K, I've plateaued at 10K. So run walk programs is how I overcome that. Also, if you have any injuries, so if you're returning to running or just starting to run and you're noticing some pain, run walk programs is the best way to put you in that middle spectrum of tissue loading. The next tip I'm going to say is to change up the surface that you're running on. So I will repeat, running injuries are repetitive stress injuries. So what you want to do is you want to try and give as much variety to your body when you're running. Obviously, this is going to be dependent on where you're living and what's accessible to you, but there are easy ways outside that you can kind of switch up your running surface. So the idea about this is there's different give for anything that you step on. You can think about if you kind of body check yourself into a bag of sand versus a concrete wall, you're going to feel a lot different impact on your body, and so that's the same thing with your feet when you run. Also, the different terrains that you run on will affect your actual run pattern or your foot strike. So I kind of listed the most popular running terrain here. Really, just if you can, once a week, try and change up what you're running on. So we'll go through the 4 here. So treadmill is something that has the least impact or the most give. It absorbs some of the shock when you step, but it is the most uniform stride. So you're going to have the most constant heel strike at the same speed. So if you have like a tendinous issue or like a tendinosis or tendinitis, it might be a little bit more aggravating. Also, when we get back to a point that we're training for runs or races are outside, so treadmills are only good to some extent. Grass and trails are a good option outside if you don't own a treadmill. That's the same thing, low impact. So if you have like an osteoarthritis or another joint issue, low impact is better. So grass, trails, things like that. There is uneven terrain, so you just want to be mindful about the safety issue of that. Asphalt, so that's a lot of the streets in Toronto, is higher impact than the two before, but it's better than concrete. It's easily accessible. But if you are choosing to run on the street at all, you got to just, again, look out for that safety concern. Concrete is the sidewalk. It's the highest impact, but obviously the easiest thing to run on. And there are some pros about concrete, so there's better control, so it's good for your tempo runs. A lot of us are going to be in that concrete asphalt kind of spectrum because that's what's out there and what's most accessible. So I would just really urge you guys to try once a week, once every couple weeks, to try and find some sort of path that's different, just to give your body a little bit of a break. Tip number 6, strengthen. This is also so important. If you are a regular runner, a new runner, anything, you have to have a running specific strengthening program. What I mean by running specific is focusing on your hip and glute strength, and also doing compound movements. So compound movements just means big movements. So squats, lunges, deadlifts, bridges. If you're recovering from a running injury, you can get into a little bit more of the specific exercises you can do. But otherwise, hip and glute compound movements is what you want to do. The biggest benefit for strengthening is your reduction of risk of injury. If you have a stronger muscle, connective tissue, if you're increased resistance to fatigue, you're going to get injured less often. So how and when to strengthen? So again, you're doing hip focused and you're doing compound movements. You want to be doing body weight versus equipment at the gym. Not that we are going to the gym now. And you want to do single leg. So running is a single leg sport, obviously. So you want to train your body in single leg. When you do single leg, you're going to focus on your lower body and core automatically. It's also going to challenge kind of the stability that you're having in those hips and your balance. You can kind of follow regular strength parameters, so 3 to 4 sets of 10. You want to do running strengthening often. So 3 to 5 times a week is what is kind of accepted in the literature out there, but doesn't have to be long. It could be 20 minutes or even less than that. When I was doing research for this webinar, I listened to a lot of coaches who recommend the sandwich method, which I liked. So that just means that you sandwich your run in between, a 5 to 10 minute dynamic warm-up and strengthening program after. So when you come back from your run, you pick 3 exercises that are body weight, single leg, you do 3 sets of 10 and you're done. I like this because it's saying that your run isn't your only workout, but you're incorporating some strength training in as well. Also, if you're doing that 4 runs a week, that's 4 strength training days, you're golden. So now's the time I'm going to get you up and moving a little bit more. So I want you guys to try some of the single leg body weight exercises. So the first one we're going to do is a single leg deadlift. So get you up. You don't need any equipment, don't need any mat or anything like that. We'll get you to stand on one leg. If you haven't done a deadlift before, I'll just show you what it looks like. So you want to hinge at your hips. You want to keep a straight back. And you kind of want to feel your hips, your glutes working. Deadlifts are mainly for your posterior chain, so your glutes, your hamstrings, and it will also stress your balance. So you guys can see how easy that is for you. You can also compare your legs. Once you're done that, we're going to go into the second exercise. Give me one more second. And the second exercise is going to be a lunge to a high knee. So same things, your body weight, you're doing it single leg, you're testing your balance. This one, you're doing your glutes as well as kind of your front of your hips, so your quads and your hip flexors. So you're going to do a lunge backwards. You're going to keep your weight in your front leg, and then you're going to drive your opposite leg up. So I'm only going over these 2 exercises today. I did make a post on my Instagram if you want more exercises, and I will be posting them kind of throughout the weeks. Really, if it's single leg, if it's body weight, and it's a compound movement, you're doing it right. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to practice that. And then once you're done, the last tip I'm going to leave you with today is I wanted to end on a little bit of a lighthearted note. When I was doing research for this webinar, so many podcasts or literature talk about kind of the mental health or the mood benefits of running. So what I would say is just make the time you spend running enjoyable. What I mean for that is listen to your body about running. If there's a day that you feel really sore or you really are dreading it or don't want to go, don't go. Like, save it for another day. Even if you had a planned run, that's okay. Try and think of running as a positive thing as opposed to a chore or negative. And it will help your running ability in the long run. Once you get kind of past that like 4 or 6 week runner's high, like in order to maintain it, you really have to have a love for the sport. So what I say is find a positive in every run. I mean, find something that you're going to enjoy about running. So whether that's a podcast, listening to music, whether it's getting outside in quarantine or kind of taking a break from maybe an annoying roommate or partner or something like that. I love running because it affects my mood a lot. I notice when I don't run, I can get a little bit into a lower mental health state. So I think about that every time I run. Running is an individualized sport, but it's really easy to compare yourself to others, to compare times or to compare training schedules. So I really urge you guys not to. Just don't go down that rabbit hole. Even if you're running with a partner and someone is faster than you, that's okay. Everyone's going to have a different natural ability with running as well, or a different athletic level coming before they started a running program. So just be mindful of that. And the last thing is allow yourself some ups and downs when you run. So as with any other like competitive sport, it's not going to be completely uphill or like an uphill progress. You're going to have days where you plan to go for a run and you don't, or you plan to make a time or a distance and you don't, and that's okay. It happens with every runner, new runners, elite runners. So just know that you're doing something that's good for your body and your mind, to allow yourself to feel good about that in itself. I did make a summary page for you guys. I'm not going to go through them all again, but if you want to take a screenshot or write anything down, now's the time. Even if you are a runner that's kind of not willing to do a 3 to 4 times a week program, still kind of use these tips, do a proper warm up, have a strengthening program in place, and just add as much variety as you can to your running to try and improve your performance and decrease that risk of injury. All right, and now it's question time. So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to write anything out and we can have a little chat. While you guys are typing, where you can find me, if you have any personal questions that you don't feel comfortable answering here, you can send me an email at michaela@foundationphysio.com. You can send me a DM at Michaela's Physio, give me a follow for running tips, or if you want to book a virtual running or physiotherapy assessment or treatment, you can go to www.foundationphysio.com.
We got a question. What's a recommended number of times to run a week to see progressive change? And that's from Tina.
Okay, thanks for the question, Tina. I'm really a fan of the 4 times a week running program, kind of changing up your variation. It's good when you're running to pick a goal. So if your goal is to increase like your interval training, your tempo runs, and your distance, that might be a lot. So you want to pick one thing that you want to see progress in, make that your focus. And then following that 3 to 4 times a week, within a couple of weeks, you should notice that if your thing is distance, notice that you're able to go a little bit farther, or if it's speed, a little bit quicker. But that 3 to 4 week, especially if you're somewhat new to running, is what I'd recommend.
Great. And Lily's got a question about how to choose the best shoes for running.
I had
That's a tough one.
Running shoes were going to come up. I chose not to talk about running shoes today, mostly because it's so different for everyone. And it's really hard to give a universal answer about that. So the best advice I would give about runners is to either go to a store that will actually take time to look at your feet. So I always recommend Black Toe Running downtown at King and Bathurst because they do a full foot assessment, or come into a physiotherapy session and take a look at your actual running without shoes and see what suits you best. There's so much debate in literature about which is the right shoe. There is going to be a little bit of trial and error and what feels best. And yeah, and especially at the time of quarantine where you can't really go out and try stuff on, I would put the running shoe discussion maybe for a later date.
Yeah, if I could just chime in for a second on that one, I would suggest that everybody gets a proper running assessment done by a physio or a chiropractor who knows running well enough to actually assess what's happening at your foot while you're running to help you guide which shoe you need. And then a really great place like Black Toe Running downtown can then take that information and help you find a proper shoe. But that is a little bit more of an individual issue, as I said. We have another great question about where you should focus on your landing pattern. For instance, should I look to land on the ball or on the flat foot?
Another really, really great question. Again, it's really hard to give universal advice about running technique. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. What I would say about where to land, don't worry as much about where in the foot you're landing, whether that be the heel, the midfoot, or the toe. I would worry more about where you're landing in relation to the center of mass of your body. So the best thing that you could do when you run is to land right under your hips. So usually we say heel striking is bad, but the only reason we say that is because when you heel strike, you're more likely to be landing far in front of you. So if you're running, if you're kind of thinking about running outside, or if you have a treadmill and you're filming yourself, anything like that, the closer you can get to landing under your body or under your hips, the better your body's going to be able to absorb all that shock and have a little bit less impact.
Great. The questions are rolling in right now. This is great. This is from Dayton. I often find I put more stress onto one leg while I'm running. Is there any advice on how to even it out or keep an even stride?
Yes, it is. And it's strength training. I'm the exact same way. I'm also recovering from an injury, and I feel myself running so much harder on one leg than the other. And if you start like a single leg strength programming for yourself, you'll notice the exercises that you do are going to be a lot harder on that one leg. And the best way to make your running more even is to train your single leg to be more even. So strengthening that leg that you feel maybe isn't doing as much work with those backward lunges, deadlifts, single leg squats, or single leg bridges, and see how that impacts your running from there.
Great. Lily's trying to reach a new PB. So she's asking, should she prioritize speed days over distance days, or should she look to divide them 50-50?
So I would say that depends what she's saying by personal best. Lily, are you talking about your distance? Or
I think for time, she's looking for time here.
For time, yeah. So in that case, I would prioritize like your tempo runs. You want to train what you're benefiting. So don't decrease your distance, but make your tempo runs that you're trying a little bit faster. So if you have a certain time, I know Lily, so I know around what time she's running, but I would decrease it from what you're doing, maybe like 5 seconds, and do that every time you're running.
Great. And there is one more question here. If you've experienced getting itchy when running, and if you know what may cause that, and it's only when she runs outside.
Interesting. I would say that's probably something to do with like the sweat glands in your legs, if you're talking about getting itchy in your legs. So it's probably going to be like a trial and error thing, but I would try either like moisturizing before you go, switching up what leggings you're wearing or what pants you're wearing.
Oh.
And if neither of those work, again, like exfoliating. I would try different things. It's definitely, you're getting itchy because the sweat that you're producing in that area is causing that reaction. So I would try a couple of those methods.
It definitely seems like everybody's been there. All of a sudden, everybody just started piping in that they also get itchy when it's cold out. So maybe it's a weather thing.
Yeah.
But you can also try talcum powder. Sorry, especially if it's in the legs or underneath your pants.
Yeah.
I found that when I was doing some outdoor running, talcum powder helped out a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely an external reaction.
Here's a great question from Griffin. How can you reduce low back pain while running, especially while running on asphalt?
Yeah, so a lot, again, it's not like a straightforward answer, but I would say the most common cause of low back pain when you run is going to be that impact. So how much force is kind of going through your skeletal system, so your bones, as opposed to your muscles accepting the force of running. So kind of combining two other answers. So looking at how you're stepping in relation to how far away it is from your body. So trying to land a little bit closer to you. A good way to do that is to think about quicker, smaller steps. So a lot of people run at different cadences. Really, if you just think about speeding up your steps so you're landing under you, that will help. And the second thing would be hip strengthening. So if your hips aren't strong enough to support you when you're landing and you're running, your low back is going to take on a lot of that force.
Hmm. I would just add to that, from experience working with different clients of all different ranges when it comes to running. As you get more experience with your running and as you get quicker and as your distance goes up, your core needs to be stronger. Your glutes
Yeah.
need to be stronger.
Yeah.
So if you're, if you have a certain amount of strength and you're pain-free at 10K, that doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be pain-free as you get quicker and you start to run half marathons and marathons as well.
Yeah, any type of single leg work too, I should have stressed this too. You're gonna do your hips, and anytime you're on single leg, you're gonna strengthen your core.
Awesome. Okay, that looks like it's the end of our questions. Thank you, Michaela. Oh, one more question here. Do glute activation, I think they mean, does doing the glute activation exercises before running provide any additional help? And that's from Alex.
Yeah, so again, a good balance. So you kind of always want to think about what works for you better. So doing glute activation before you run is going to be good because it's going to help make those muscles be a little bit more awake and better help accept load. You just want to make sure that you're not doing so much that you're actually fatiguing your muscles quicker than if you were to just go for a run. So what I would say is glute activation where you're finding it kind of still feeling the burn, but it's not too difficult or too hard, and not doing that 4 sets of 10, but maybe reducing that to like 1 or 2 sets of 10, just to wake them up, but not to fatigue them. But there would be benefit to that for sure.
Awesome. So I think with that, we will wrap up our presentation today in our webinar. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you for everybody who attended. If you have any more questions, anything specific, things maybe you didn't want to share with the entire group, feel free to reach out to Michaela at foundationphysio.com via email, and of course, Michaela S. Physio on Instagram. And I know she'll be more than happy to help you guys with your training programs